Hey, we are continuing our series entitled, I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. And in this series, we've been looking at what God says about money and stewardship. We've talked about the important fact that God owns everything, that He's entrusted a portion of what He has to us to manage. And we've learned what it takes to manage it well. And today, I want to talk to you about a financial miracle. If you're here and you need a financial miracle, I believe this message has the power to transform your life. Most of us, we've experienced a time in our life where we've said, it'll take a miracle for us to get out of this mess. In fact, even though we're in a financial series, this message applies to any situation, financial or not, any situation you're facing where you're desperate for God to show up. Hey, let's start out with great news. We know the author of miracles. Acts chapter 2, verse 22 says, Jesus from Nazareth was a very special man. And God clearly showed this to you by the miracles, wonders, and signs He did through Jesus. Jesus, He knows your story. Jesus, He loves you. And not only did He do many miracles when He walked the planet 2,000 years ago, Jesus is still in the miracle working business today. Hebrews 13:8 says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Hey, let's read the story of that miracle I was talking about. It's in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1. It says, the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. Elisha replied to her, well, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? Well, your servant has nothing in there at all, she said, except a little oil. Elisha said, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side. Well, she left him and afterwards shut the door behind her and her sons, and they brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. And when all the jars were full, she said to her son, well, bring me another one. But he replied, there's not a jar left. And then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left. This is an amazing true story of a financial miracle. And I believe we can learn so much from this story today because in this story is literally a recipe for a financial miracle. And if you'll dial in today, you're going to discover the 3 ingredients that you need for that miracle. The first of which is in 2 Kings chapter 4. It says, the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slave. Here's the first ingredient you really got to have for a miracle. It's going to kind of surprise you. You need, write this down somewhere, you need a desperate situation. That's not a hard one to find, is it? You need a desperate situation. Look at the story. The husband died. But what did he leave his family when he died? A huge pile of debt. Do you think this husband ever thought that if he were to die, that bankruptcy courts would enslave his sons to pay back his debts? Do you think he understood the jeopardy he was putting his family in when he took on those loans? I read that and I wondered what his boys thought. It's awful to lose your dad, but at least you'd get an inheritance from him. But here they inherit his debts. And now his wife is in a desperate and hopeless situation. It's guaranteed poverty. This story says her husband's dead. And now the creditor's coming to take her 2 boys as slaves. Can you imagine living in that dreadful situation? Perhaps you already do. Perhaps today your situation is similar. If that's you, if life looks hopeless today, look to God. He's faithful, and He's not just faithful in the book. Let me tell you a story of His faithfulness in our church, in the church that you're in right now. A few months before we held our very first worship service at the Rave Movie Theater back in 2005, we began what's become known as the largest outdoor sign campaign the city has ever seen. We placed over 1,000 2-foot by 2-foot signs, and we placed 750 4-foot by 8-foot signs. It took weeks to get them all into place. And you couldn't drive anywhere in this part of town without getting an invite to the church at the Rave. It was bigger than a presidential campaign. I'm not kidding. How many signs were there? Well, there were so many signs that the city passed some law that said you can't put up signs like this ever again. We were going to start this church at the Rave, and so we had this worship pastor from California coming, a small group pastor from Virginia coming, both moving their families, and we had a great contract with the Rave movie theater to hold church in it. But right after we got the signs up, right after we invited the whole city, right after all these families, these pastors moved their families to Fort Wayne, the general manager at the Rave called me to a meeting to tell me that they couldn't honor the contract they signed. They explained that the mall was up for sale, and in the process, the lawyers were going through all the leases at Jefferson Pointe, and that they discovered that subleasing was not allowed in their lease. And they said, Pastor, we really tried to make this work for your church, but the lawyers said no. So we've got to exit this contract. You've got to look for another place to start the church. Listen, when you've just launched the largest sign campaign in the history of the city, and you've got 2 staff members who are moving their families from the West Coast and the East Coast to help you launch the church, and the place where you're supposed to meet says, the lawyers say no. Friends, that's a desperate situation. But a desperate situation is the first ingredient you need for a miracle. So at least we had that. The second ingredient is further in the story. Look at verse 2. Elisha replied to this woman, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? Well, your servant has nothing in there, just a little oil. Elisha says, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil in all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side. Friends, when things are hopeless, it's easy to think that you have nothing. But Elijah says, what do you have? She says nothing at first, but then she says, well, I've got a little oil. She says she only had a little oil, but actually she had a lot more than that. What did she have? She had a little oil. She still had her sons. They weren't taken by the creditor yet. She also had her neighbors. She had access to Elisha, the man of God. She was healthy enough to get God's representative. She had desperation. And friends, desperation causes us to be willing to do some things that we never consider doing. I mean, friends, if life looks hopeless, it's easy to think you've got nothing. But what do you have? Children, family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, skills, education, faith, direct access to God through prayer and His Word. So here's the second ingredient for a miracle. Write it down somewhere. I need to seek God. That's what we need to do. I'm sitting in this party room over at the Rave Theater in kind of a kid-sized chair, and these 2 movie theater managers are saying, well, sorry, Pastor, start your church somewhere else. You can't start it here at the Rave. And friends, here's what I did. I paused for a moment, and I looked away from them, and instead I looked to God and I said, well, Lord, having this church at the Rave, this was your idea. I didn't want to start church here. You told me to. So God, you have a problem. What do you want me to do? Listen, church, there was no other move if you want a miracle. I couldn't make it happen. The managers couldn't make it happen. You've got to look to the one that can make it happen if you want it to happen. If you want a miracle, you've got to seek the miracle maker. That's the first 2 ingredients. You need a desperate situation, and you need to seek God. Those are the easy ingredients. Here's the hard one. God's representative, Elisha, told her, go around and ask. Ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Right? Friends, it doesn't make sense. It defies logic. It seems strange. If I've just got a little bit of an oil in a jar, why do I need to go get more jars? For what? Listen, sometimes God doesn't make sense. Sometimes what He asks doesn't compute. He told Noah to build an ark to get animals and his family in it, and there's no water. It makes no sense. He tells Moses to strike a rock, and he's going to make a drinking fountain for his people. It makes no sense. You don't get water from a rock. He told Gideon he needed less than 1% of his army of like 32,000 men to win a battle. He says, so Gideon, just send the army home. All I need is 300 guys, God says. That makes no sense. Jesus tells Peter, hey, Peter, go fishing, and the first fish you catch will have the money that you need to pay your taxes and mine. Just look in the fish's mouth. But it makes no sense. And he tells this woman, with a tiny bit of oil in one jar, to go get more jars. It makes no sense. But here's what she did. Verse 5. She left him and afterwards shut the door behind her and her sons, and they brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. What did this family do? They went and got jars. This is the third ingredient. If you want to see a miracle, you need a desperate situation. You need to seek God. And here's number 3, write it down. I need to do what God says. Oh, you've got to do what God says. Listen, if it seems like God is asking you to do something crazy, just do what he says. Listen, I'm just guessing, but I believe the sons had no issues following mom's orders, right? It might have been one of the few times in history that children immediately obeyed mom, right? Go and ask the neighbors for empty jars or be sold into slavery. Your choice. Gosh, if that's me, if I'm facing slavery, I'm trick-or-treating for jars, right now. And the neighbors helped by providing empty jars. Can you imagine their questions? Can you think they were asking like, why do you need jars? Right? But the amazing thing is that God chooses to use people to accomplish his work. Asking the neighbors allowed the entire neighborhood to witness and participate in the miracle. They all knew her husband had died. They all knew her children were in jeopardy of being placed into slavery to repay her husband's debts. So helping them out with some jars was the least that they could do. But the key here is that the widow and her boys had to do what God said. They had to go ask for jars. No matter your current financial situation, you can learn from this. Ask yourself, am I doing what God has told me to do? Maybe your situation's not a financial one, right? Maybe you need to ask God for help with your marriage or your kids or your business. Well, are you doing what God said to do? Luke 6:46, Jesus says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Lord means Jesus is boss. He's calling the shots. Listen, if that widow had sought God's guidance but refused to do what God said, her sons would be enslaved and she'd be broke and alone. When I turned to God in that party room, God said the weirdest thing to me. He said, relax, Ray, I got this. So I turned to the 2 managers and I said, men, God's told me he's got this. Don't worry about the lawyers. We're having church here at the Rave. And the senior manager leaned over to me and he said, Pastor, you need to make alternative plans for your church. I mean, the lawyers have said no. And I said, men, God said yes. And they're looking at me like I'm a bit delusional. Like I could see it in their eyes. So I said, men, God said relax. He said, don't worry about this. He said it'll work out. So we'll just meet here. And as I walked away from that meeting, I had to fight the feelings of trying to fix this on my own. I know how to enforce a contract. I know how to lawyer up. I know how to work my way around a hurdle. But as I walked out of the doors, God said, Ray, I told you, I've got this. I told you, relax. So remember, I got signs everywhere. We've got staff and their families who've just moved here, West Coast, East Coast. And the temptation for me to fix this was so strong. But God said, relax. So you know what I did? I picked up the phone. I booked a trip for my family to Disneyland out in California. I kid you not. I didn't understand it. I couldn't make sense of it, but God wanted to resolve this without me. He wanted me to have faith. So I didn't tell a soul, not the other pastors, not Lisa, not anyone. I simply took my family on vacation. And this is common for God. He wants us to have faith in him. And I learned a lot about faith that week. I found a new definition for it. I began to call faith relaxed desperation. I was desperate, but I'm in Disneyland. And God said, hey, relax. I got this. And listen, when you do what God says to do, he will do what he says he will do. Church, when we're faced with a desperate situation and we seek God and we do what he says, the result will always be a miracle. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 5 says, this widow left him and afterwards shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her and she kept pouring. And when all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there's not a jar left. And the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God and he said, well, go sell the oil, pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what's left. You know, every time I read that, I get stoked. I mean, can anyone testify to the fact that God provides exactly what we need right when we're ready to give up? So what happened here? She's faced with a desperate situation. She sought God. She gathered the energy to do what he said, and God showed up and worked a miracle and literally put her in the oil business. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 7, go sell the oil, pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what's left. Friends, God provided enough. How much is enough for you? I mean, it's not about getting wealthy. It's not about having a bunch of stuff. God gave more than enough. The widow asked for help to save her sons from slavery, and God did that. Plus, he provided enough for all 3 of them to live on. Listen, God fixes tough situations, even when they're self-imposed. And he's the great forgiver and he's the great provider. He's a miracle worker. It's happened in this church. I know those managers thought I was in denial because I didn't heed their warning, but I knew the Lord had called us to start a church, and I knew this was not my problem, but God's. He told me to relax. So I went home, got the family, went to Disneyland. 5 days later, my family and I were sitting at Universal Studios watching an outdoor water ski show, and I get a call from one of those managers. And they say, Ray, hey, we don't understand it. We don't know what happened, but the lawyers called. Imagine lawyers calling. They said, tell that church it's okay to use the theater for church. And they said, Ray, did you pressure something? Did you call in a favor from someone? I said, no, I just told God. You want to know what happened, man? God happened. And the manager said, well, this was impossible. We were told there was no way this would work out for the church. So maybe God did do this. Listen. Jesus said in Luke 18:27, what is impossible with man is possible with God. Remember that scene in Dumb and Dumber where Jim Carrey plays this idiot of a man who asked this beautiful woman if she would date him? And he says, so what are the chances of a guy like me dating a girl like you? Like 1 out of 100? And she says something along the lines of, no, more like 1 out of 1,000,000. To which Jim Carrey excitedly responds, so you're telling me there's a chance? Listen, church, when you're in a desperate situation and you seek God and you obey him, I'm telling you, there's more than just a chance. Listen, I'm hoping this series is helping you in a real and substantial way. I want you to know as the leader of this church that our entire leadership, our staff, our teams, we are committed to help you win in your life. We love you. And we know that God's principles, they always work. If you're in a bind today, if your finances are upside down, if you need a miracle, I want to finish today's message by offering a time of prayer for you. If life has pushed you to desperation, if you need a miracle for your finances, for your health, for a relationship, for your soul, I want to take a moment and pray specifically for you. If this is you today, if you need a miracle, would you just put miracle, #miracle in the feed right now? That's your step of faith. I can't take a step of faith for you, but if you will simply put #miracle in the feed right now, I'll pray and I know our God will work. Do you need a financial miracle, a health miracle, a relationship miracle, a kid miracle, a parent miracle? Whatever you need, you right now, #miracle, put it in the feed right now. #miracle. Listen, I want to pray right now for you. And as I pray, we're just, you could be there and you don't need a miracle. You could be praying along with me for those who are in desperate situations. So let's pray together. Father, desperation is just an awful place to be. And yet it's a great place to be when it comes to our faith. Because it drives us past our own abilities and skills and talents. It drives us past the help resources that we lean on, that sometimes have become idols in our life. And it drives us to our knees straight to you. And so God, for every person that needs a miracle right now, for every desperate situation, I just want to pray that they would put the principles of this message into place. That God, they've already got the desperate situation. They just need to cry out to you for help. And so God, right now, would you hear their prayers? And if you're in one of those desperate situations, you just right now, you voice that desperation to God. You say, God, I'm desperate in this relationship. I'm desperate in these finances. I'm desperate in this health situation. I'm desperate with my kids. Whatever it is, you say to God, God, I'm desperate with this. Help me. Help me. And then God, I'm counting on you because you are a God that we can always count on. Show up. And friends, I want you to listen right now. Listen to the still small voice of our God. He's going to share something for you to do. Listen to his voice. And whatever he shares, even if it seems a little crazy, you go and do it. And then you watch how God will do his part. Father, we pray right now for every person in this situation that they would just lean in and listen and they would obey. That's our prayer. Hear our heart. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Hey, I want to remind you, in just a couple of weeks, we've got a financial seminar. It's happening from 3 to 5 in the afternoon of February 27th. It's after church. Like go to lunch, right? And then come back, be ready at 3 o'clock. It is an incredible financial learning experience with a renowned, nationally known expert, Joe Sangl, that's coming here. He's funny, he's a great communicator, and he's going to talk about money in a way that you will never forget. And the reason you won't forget it is it's going to transform your finances. Hey, here's Deanna with the details.
Hey there! Thank you so much for watching and checking us out. Hey, I want you to know we go live every Sunday, 9, 10:15, and 11:30. So I would love for you to like and subscribe to make sure that we can stay connected together all the time. I'll see you next time. Bye!